Hello and good morning, and a special hello this morning because it's Valentine's Day. So wherever you are in the world, I hope you are enjoying spending time with your Valentines, and let me know in the comments whether you've got any unexpected gifts. Wouldn't it be really exciting if you got a Valentine's card that truly was anonymous? Do you remember those days when you were back at school and never quite knowing whether your friends were playing a trick on you or you really did have a secret admirer? Hello there, I'm Julie from Julie Davis Flower Workshops, and Flower Start, the online flower arranging classes. So, an admission. I cannot recall the last time that I got flowers for Valentine's Day. Hello, Linda. Good morning. Did you get anything for Valentine's Day, Linda? Let me know in the comments. And if you're not watching live, leave me the hashtag replay and we'll catch up in the comments later on today. So my husband always feels a little bit of a disadvantage on Valentine's Day because naturally, as the florist that teaches, I have quite a lot of flowers at home in any event. But he always gives me a little bit of a surprise a couple of days before Valentine's Day. He gets agreement that we're not going to do anything for Valentine's Day, and then he always leaves a little bit of a surprise for me on the kitchen table. So normally my daughter and I eat breakfast together. My husband comes down later in the morning, and when I came down this morning, the breakfast table had been delayed and there was a heart-shaped box of chocolates for me and a heart-shaped box of chocolates for my daughter. So that was all very lovely. But perhaps you might secretly be expecting a delivery of flowers later on today. And I thought I would show you a quick trick as to how you can make your Valentine's flowers look even more fabulous. Now, just a little bit of word of warning here. If your delivery is from a florist, you may well just want to enjoy your flowers as they came from the florist. But it may be that perhaps your Valentine might have tried to go a little bit more budget conscious and may have picked you up some red roses from your supermarket, which are very competitively priced. And if you want to make your supermarket flowers look a little bit more glamorous, this is going to be the video for you. Now, a little bit of an inside track on supermarket flowers. Many years ago, when my daughter was at primary school, I used to run a flower arranging club after school. And we used to get the flowers free from one of the local supermarkets. So I believe that they were donated to the local church. The church used what they wanted, and then they were donated to me. And I don't think at any point in that tracking of the flowers they were ever put in water. So before flower class, I used to have to give a bit of an emergency first aid to all these flowers and then divide them up into groups and give each child that came to flower class a little bunch of flowers, and then we made our flower arrangements. Well, one year, the week after Valentine's Day, I totted up the price of the flowers, and I cannot remember the exact price, but it was pretty much nearly, I would say, perhaps it was over £100, but £100 sticks in my mind. We got £100 worth of flowers the following week because, of course, after Valentine's Day, there isn't the demand for red roses. So my top trick for you is, if you haven't been given any Valentine's Day flowers today, why don't you check out your supermarket in a couple of days' time and just see what the reductions are looking like? Because certainly one of our local supermarkets absolutely overrun with red roses. Another one I went to, there weren't that many, so they've probably hedged their bets and done more appropriate buying. And if your roses, when you see them at the supermarket, are looking a little bit, down at heel, the thing to do is to take them out of the cellophane, take off the leaves, and you know about recutting the stem ends. But this time, before you put the stems into your vase of water, put the kettle on, boil a cup of water, a mug of water, and as you recut your stems, you've got the option of wrapping the heads up in kitchen paper, kitchen towel, so they don't get damaged by the hot steam, and then put the flower stems into your mug of water. I normally hold them in the mug of water for a slow count of 10 seconds. and it's to give the a bit of a shock to your stem, and it opens up the cells, and that encourages the uptake of water, and then you would put your flowers in your vase in the normal way. So it's a good emergency trick if you've got some slightly bedraggled flowers. I would do that and keep the flowers to myself, but if you were gifting flowers to a friend, I would always make sure they were fresh. So if I was buying flowers for a specific occasion, I always go to my florist, and in fact I pre-order at the florist in order that I know that I'm getting what I want, and not doing that thing when you go to the supermarket when you're mentally calculating. You go into the supermarket and think, I wanted all pink roses and this, that and the other, and of course it's not there, so you're suddenly making an arrangement in yellows and whites when you had a different idea to begin with. So a little top tip just to keep you going. And actually, if you're in the mood for a few sort of Valentine's crafts, if you're having a special lunch or a special dinner at home and you want to dress up your house a little bit, I have got 4, I'm holding up 5 fingers there, 4 Valentine's themed videos. So if you're interested in those, why don't you leave a comment? So leave me a red heart in the comments, and I will make sure I find those Valentine's Day videos, and I will put them in the description underneath the video. So good morning, Joan, how are you? And I'd happen to know that Joan was the recipient of Valentine's flowers yesterday. So Joan, we're looking forward to seeing what your flowers look like, and why don't you post a picture over in the free Facebook group, Flower Start World. What I particularly like when people post pictures, I like the befores and afters. So the flowers as you got them, and then the flowers as you've decided to rearrange them. That would be lovely. So what I have got here, I've got a couple of vases down here. Actually, you can see a little bit of it here. I've decided to revamp a couple of greenery vase arrangements. In fact, one of them may well go straight into the compost bin. But I have been reading a book, you may know this if you follow along with my blog or my general news, that I have set myself a challenge of doing a Julia and Julia flower edit challenge, and me, Julie, are going to follow in the footsteps of Julia Clements, and I'm planning to make all the flower arrangements which Julia Clements made in her Fun with Flowers book, which was published in 1950, across the course of the year. And one of the things that Julia recommends is that in the winter time that you always have a vase of greenery on the side, because the greenery is really long lasting, and as long as you refresh the water from time to time, recut your stem ends, and just make sure you've got good hygiene in your vase, as and when you get flowers, you can just slide them into your vase, and then you have a pre-formed flower arrangement. So at this time of the year, if it wasn't Valentine's Day, I might be making a greened up arrangement, and then next time I go into town and I bought some tulips, for instance, I would slide my tulips into the arrangement, and when they died 5 days later, I could take those out, but I would still have this really lush green arrangement. Joan, yes, I noticed your comment on the blog, Joan. The list of containers which you've seen me post on Instagram and I've got on my phone is actually the physical list that I wrote. So I turned every single page in her book, and I looked at the photographs, and I read the little bit of descriptive text underneath, and I read what she'd said in the main text of the book, and I physically wrote down all the containers that she'd used. So it wasn't a list at the back of the book. I've actually, in order to organise myself, I've actually been very mechanical and scientific about it. I've actually written it down in a spreadsheet. So I've got the page number that the flower arrangement is on. I have divided it into seasons. So the flower ranges seasons of spring, summer, autumn and Christmas, because of course there's no winter in the flower ranger's world. And then what Jane's saying about, I got my pink sticky notes. So what I've done is I've then reordered the spreadsheet, because the book wasn't split up into spring, summer, autumn and Christmas. So I've made a list, and then I have, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. And then I did a sort function on the spreadsheet. So I've sorted all the arrangements out by season, because I'm going to make them seasonally. Of course, I can't be making autumn arrangements when it's, we've gone past autumn and we're just approaching spring. And then what you saw in the photographs I've been taking, I think there's one on my Instagram that went up yesterday, I've then put little post-it notes in the book, and I just flagged up those books, the pages are the spring pages. So I have got this sort of mental list of the flowers I need to look out for. So the next arrangement, I think I'm going to, it's all going to come across in a rush, I think, because I'm sort of thinking, I've just got to wait for these flowers to mature. And then I think the flowers will suddenly arrive all at once, and I'll be madly panicking, thinking about, I need to make all these arrangements. Of course, I don't need to. It should be a joyful experience. But the next arrangements I've got my eye on, there's another anemone arrangement, and then there's, lots of tulips and daffodils, and grape hyacinths. That's what's holding me back at the moment, because we have grape hyacinths in our garden, but they're not in flower yet, and I can't quite decide whether I will wait for my grape hyacinths, the little tiny sort of conical flowers with the tiny pips on them, or whether I go into town, and our local florist and the street market, with the plant seller at the street market, has grape hyacinths which are already in flower. So I'm kind of thinking, do I want to spend X amount of pounds on buying some potted grape hyacinths to use now in an arrangement, or do I do it for free from my garden later on in the year? The only thing I haven't got, although we have daffodils in our garden, we don't really know, we don't have loads and loads of daffodils, so I'd probably buy those from the supermarket because they are inexpensive, probably about £1 a bunch or something. So Joan, I think I may well have written a blog post about that. I'm a week in hand with my blog posts, but I am reasonably sure that if I haven't already written it on the blog post that came out at the weekend, it'll be in the blog post. That sort of thinking process will be in the blog post on the weekend coming up. In fact, I think I explained that in last week's blog post, because next week's blog post is about the arrangement again I posted on my Instagram yesterday. I have made number 1 arrangement, so that's the first arrangement out of 85. So that was quite a good one. It was all going really well. In fact, you saw a little bit if you watched my video yesterday, my scheduled video yesterday about pin holders. If you go right to the end of that video, I show you all my pin holders, all different shapes and sizes, and actually weights and means of attaching them to your dishes. Right at the end of the video, I use a pin holder and I make a pin holder arrangement. You kind of see, it's not a beginning to end make, it's a sort of you see me at the beginning and then you see it at the end, but that is the first arrangement that I've made, and it was all going swimmingly until Julia Childs said that she got a piece of what she kept calling natural bark, and she put it around the bottom of her arrangement to disguise the pin holder, and that caused me a little bit of a problem. So I was sitting at my kitchen table with this, this simple line arrangement made using white anemones, and then I was trying to break my largest piece of bark and put it around the arrangement. And of course, when I put it around the arrangement, it was all a bit heavy, and my flowers started bobbing around it all over the place. And that's a reason why I think if you're doing these arrangements in the pin holders with a sort of open reservoir of water, I think it would be much easier if you actually made them in situ, so the place where you're going to display the flowers. So for me, picking up my arrangement with it, this casserole dish full of water, and putting it down on the little, it's an old linen box of my parents, which I use in the corner of the kitchen as a little side table, and it's where I take a lot of my photographs. I got over there, and then I didn't even trip. It was just the nudging of me lifting this casserole dish that I ended up having to mop up loads of water. So note to self next time that I need to make in situ, or what I think I should have done, if you remember the pin holders which I showed you in yesterday's video, they were sort of actually attached to little conical pots. I would have been better off making my arrangement in this sort of self-contained unit of the small reservoir of water, and then set that inside my larger casserole dish. I think you needed the size of the dish to balance the placement and height of the flowers. So yes, Joan, you're saying there, I have got 40 pin holders. Can you imagine that? And I had more than that to begin with because a lot of the pin holders were donated to me by members of our flower club. When our flower club decided to go foam free, that was at our AGM this time last year, to encourage people to go foam free, I redonated, I don't know how many, probably, I don't know, half a dozen pin holders, or half a dozen people took them up and redonated them back to the club. So people made a contribution towards them. That money then went back to club funds. But the pin holders I had weren't just those, what you imagine as a pin holder, like a round metal hairbrush is the easiest way of describing it if you don't know what they are, just as a round disc. But I had ones that were oblong that looked like actual nail brushes, some that were with hardly any spikes on them, so really sparse. So I guess that must be for, perhaps impaling, proper woody stems, almost like branches on them, not nice delicate twigs, but chunky branches like that. So it'll be quite interesting to see whether I actually get any use of them. I will say though that they are just so interesting to look at, and I may whittle down my collection and just keep one of each. And then, interesting enough, going foam free because we don't want the single-use plastic polluting the environment. Several of the pin holders I had were plastic, and just a total revelation really. Why would you want a plastic pin holder which is lightweight, so you'd always need something to hold it down, and the pins on which you impale your plant material weren't as sharp as the metal pins. They were quite blunt, a little bit rounded. And I didn't really seem to have that strength. So what I have done following that video, I have ordered myself a little brush and a pin straightener. So although I'm not doing a live Facebook video this Friday, if the pin holder cleaner arrives in time, I'll do a short pre-recorded video and then you'll be able to see what that looks like. So enough chat from me. So sorting out my vases. So you may have seen this rather bedraggled now looking arrangement, which did I do a week ago, 2 weeks ago, not entirely sure, but this is the arrangement I made when I posted the video about what to expect at a Zoom flower class. So I showed you a little bit behind the scenes of how you log on to Zoom flower class, and then I let the video run and you had a class on this. So this really has gone over, but whenever I get rid of my vase arrangements, good morning, Lisa. How are you, Lisa? When I get rid of my arrangements, I always like to see what I can salvage. So there's some little seed heads there, which I'm going to put down safely. And then the rest of this, there's bits of bamboo. There's the arum leaves, which are going a bit brown around the edges. There's a tiny bit of bay. And there's some Cantoni aster. There's a little bit of seed heads, and as I take everything out, the mystery mechanic in the bottom of this vase was my celery, the heart of some celery. So this is a celery vase with celery in it. It had been sitting on our kitchen side, and I'd used all the big bits, and I'm wondering now, because somebody, I think it might have been you, Lisa, you commented that the celery had roots on it. So I'm wondering whether, could I plant the celery and let it grow and grow celery to use as a flower frog? It's just a little bit, in terms of eating it, they're a little bit tiny. Probably what I would do, I quite often use these bits of celery as a supplement or alternative to using onion when you're making that base sort of bolognese sauce, which seems to be the magic ingredient of practically every meal we eat in our house. Lisa is encouraging me to give it a go. And actually, I've got a question to throw back at you. My thrifted find, and you would have seen that on one of my Thrift With Me videos, I bought this vase in Canterbury, and the original marked price was £7, way too expensive for me in a charity shop. Joan's given me the thumbs up for planting the celery too. And I bought it for £3.50, half price. Well, when I went to another charity shop just the other week in Sandwich, and I think I will be doing not so much a thrift tour, but I might do a sort of historic tour of Sandwich, upcoming video. But I saw not a similar shape, but a more open bowl, and it actually said it was Chippendale glass. And then it made me think, is this a piece of Chippendale glass? And I've got a small one as well. And I've also got a more open oval bowl, but I don't think that's Chippendale glass because the oval bowl doesn't have that that hexagonal foot on it. So that's my latest bit of exploring, is how do you actually identify the maker of the things that you find that are thrifted. So yes, I'm rather pleased with that, Jen. And what I particularly like about it is called a trophy glassware, and of course it does look like it's a trophy. So my moments of madness, I like to just give myself a little bit of a round of applause that things are going well. So I'm going to put my celery back in there because I may plant it. And now at the corner of my eye, my husband is now eating his breakfast, and I can just see him rolling his eyes towards me in the back of my head. And then the other arrangement that I showed you was the one I made using my leftover Christmas greenery. And look, from a distance, that is still looking A-OK. And this has been sitting in my dining room since that time. And this is the look that I want to recreate for my imaginary 12 dozen roses, which will be arriving today. There's some things that I just have to get rid of. The decorative cabbage, that's well and truly gone. What I did quite like, though, was I put in a piece of euphorbia. And although the euphorbia leaves have gone a bit, actually I'll probably just tickle those off. But look, the flower or the bract is starting to develop. So all the, the hints that spring, I don't quite know where to put that to get it to focus, but that real hint that spring is on the way. Our garden, as ever, just looks like a sort of vaguely brown-green mass. But enough of that, it's going straight in to the compost heap. And then I've got all these other bits and pieces. And I always quite like to take a moment to look down in my vase. If, like me, and you're not particularly clean with your vases, I tend to make these arrangements, and I tell everybody to make sure you recut your stem ends every few days and swish out your water. And of course, I don't do that myself. I just forget about them. So in the real world of flower arranging, can you see I'm starting to get a little bit of mould around the edge there, because the moisture from the plants and the lack of air circulation is creating the mould. And then right at the bottom, I can't smell that the water smells, although I don't actually have a very good sense of smell, and it's cold out here, but that's going to affect the smell. But you sort of look at the bottom. Number one, pat on the back, it has still got water in the bottom. Quite often, I do pick up my vases of flowers, especially when they're in these opaque vases. I think that's a little bit light. And I think, well, that's the reason my greenery and my flowers died. There wasn't any fresh water left. So I've just got a tiny bit of water in there that's not looking particularly healthy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip that water onto the flower bed, and then I will wash that up properly. A good old hot water wash with washing up liquid in it, clean and dry, and then that'll be ready for next time. So the flowers I'm going to make now for the bunch of flowers, the arrangement I'm going to make now for my imaginary dozen red roses, I'm actually going to make it in my hand as a tied arrangement, and then I will put that into a brand new sparkling clean vase. And I might even, as it's all going to be brand new and sparkling clean, put it in a glass vase. And just especially as I'm going to be twisting my stem ends, the stems will look quite attractive in the vase. If you arrange flowers in a more informal style in a vase, normally I do it in an opaque vase, so you can't see the tangle of stems inside. But when you're doing something that's got a more curated look to it, it does benefit from being shown off. So I have been around the garden and I've picked some peculiar things. Number one, we don't have much in our garden, so it's always quite tricky. And number two, why have I picked laurel? Well, it's because I don't have anything else to pick. Normally I steer away from laurel in a vase because I find the leaves are quite large and they will overwhelm, dominant. They become too dominant and they're out of scale with everything else in your vase. So it may well be that I make this arrangement in my hand and then I decide that I'm not going to keep it in there. But, you know, better to have something than nothing. Now, next question is, the leaf with the hole, what am I going to do with it? Now, reading Julia Clement's book, she would say that the English style of arranging flowers is that you get rid of all these little bits like this because you want the best flowers to be shown, the best plant material. But apparently, in the Eastern cultures, Ikebana, they show off all the stages. And they will quite happily put these gnarled, holey and nibbled leaves into their Ikebana arrangements. I didn't quite catch your comment, Joan, there. It went off screen. Something about, do I donate my vases back to the charity shop? I will say I do have a churn of vases going along. I love hunting for things in the charity shop. And I've got to the stage now, after, I've probably been a regular a regular at charity shops for the last 15 years. A little bit before that, but more in addictive sense the last 15 years. And to begin with, I used to buy things because I could afford them, because everything in the charity shop is on the whole inexpensive. And as the years have passed, I've become more discerning as well. And as the years have passed, with the nature of my business changing, I used to supply all the materials when I did live flower arranging classes. So if we were doing an arrangement foam-free arrangement in a vintage looking vase, I would go out and source X many vintage vases, vases, they weren't vintage necessarily, and then I would have them in my house. So I would sort of buy 10 vases that looked similar, and then if I found that only 8 people had booked the class, I'd be left over with 2 vases. So it would sort of happen like this. I would have this whole collection of vases I wasn't using. So that was if you watch my early videos in my Facebook live group, you'll have seen me decluttering things like that. And the time I cleared out my vase collection, I had about 28 white vases, which are all sort of quite similar. Let's see, your comments popped up again now, Joan. Oh, right, got the question now, Joan. Joan's question was, do I find that when the vases and containers have got a motif on them, like a flower design on them or something, do I find that distracting from my arrangements? I would say it's down to the look and personal taste. If you wanted me to jump one way or the other, I would say personally, I find vases with a motif on them, whether that's a raised motif or like a printed flower or painted floweret, I find it distracting, although I will say, because there's always an exception to every rule, that my husband's daughter gave me a little jug. Again, you might have seen that. What did I put in that? When I showed you my armchair in my bedroom on the little blue occasional table, there was some, I'd used that jug, it's sort of Victorian-esque looking, and it's got quite a big flower print on one side, roses, and on the back it's got a smaller rose. So I like that, but that's because it's been gifted to me from somebody that I know. And but on the whole, I don't. I prefer my vases to be just the receptacle. The blank canvas, really. I want my flowers to do the talking rather than the vase. But loads of people buy vases and use containers, and they have them as ornaments almost, don't they? And they don't put things in them. But I do think if you've got something, I'm thinking then of my mum. My mum and dad used to love pottery. I never quite realised this as a child, but we always seemed to go to, quite often we would go to a pottery as a day out when we went on holiday, and we go to the second shop. And I can remember my mum having a vase, I don't know whether one of my sisters has got it, quite a sort of, it was an oval vase but had wider at the top, thinner at the bottom, it would have been in the 70s, a sort of grey concrete look, might have been a Paul pottery, with an owl on the front, a sort of stylised owl. And that was always on what we called the bureau in our living room. But that would be quite a difficult vase to arrange flowers in, because you've got quite a modern shape with quite a folksy motif, and then you've got the colours of the owl, which I seem to recall were sort of pinks and reds, a little bit of green in it. I think probably we put daffodils in it. Can't really remember. We didn't often have cut flowers at home at all, so I don't really know. So I've got my little bit of laurel there, and what I'm doing is I'm taking off anything, all the green leaves and the side shoots, because when I want to make this little posy or bouquet, when I make a hand-tied bouquet, you want all the fluff at the top and all the clean stems at the bottom. And if you're particularly interested in having a sort of tutorial as to how to make a hand-tied posy, you will find there's a couple of downloads on my website. One is the DIY wedding flowers using red roses. That has how to make a wedding bouquet using red roses. And the other thing you might be interested in is my 4-week online flower arranging class, which is emails and pre-recorded videos. And the last sort of homework project is making a tied bouquet. So I've got some rather large leaves here. They're all a little bit wet because when we woke up this morning, we had another frost. And as I was cutting, obviously the temperature had risen a little bit, and I was getting a bit wet. So these are a little bit wet still. I did, I was going to say, I've had my nails done. I'm trying to do everything I can to keep my nails nice. So when I did the chopping, I did actually keep my gloves on, and they weren't gardening gloves, they were my going out in the cold gloves, bay. So lovely and aromatic, and personally speaking, a much better scale for a vase arrangement. It's not going to be quite so overwhelming. So I've tried to keep the lengths long. It's good to have a stem with a bit of bushiness on top because you want this little bouquet arrangement to really fill out. And of course, if you were getting your dozen red roses you were going to put into your bouquet, into your vase afterwards, I would put them in. Nice to see you, Lisa. Catch up with you. Yeah, Joan, post it in the group and then we can have a proper chat about it. I'll be able to see what it is you're asking me about. If you have got a dozen red roses being given to you to arrange as you want, having the greenery is a really good base. And then what I would do is to put your vase where you're going to have it. So, you know, if it's wherever your favourite place is for having your vase, whether it's on your coffee table or against a wall, or whatever. And then I would arrange your roses in so you can see them. So I wouldn't put too many, I wouldn't put any at the back. I would sort of think about your vase as being this 3/4 arrangement with, you know, the main area here when you looked straight on with sort of these two wings disappearing at the sides. So you want to make sure that, you know, you're getting value for money. Whoever bought you these flowers, you want to be able to see them. So I would put your greenery in your vase, and then it would, you know, a little bit of an expectation, won't it? You've suddenly got this massive vase on your mantelpiece with a beautiful green arrangement, and you spend all day waiting for those red roses to arrive. Well, my advice is don't wait forever. Go out and buy your own, and go out and buy them tomorrow, the day afterwards. So they might be a little bit more reduced in price. So I'm going to use those, and then I'm going to sift through and see what I can salvage from that vase arrangement. So I still got a little bit of Christmas pine. The one thing I'm not going to use is, these don't look too bad, but every time I do pick my vase up, because I have to sort of move it around depending on what I'm doing, the berries on the ivy, I can sort of hear this ping, and then I'm scrabbling around the floor trying to find out where the berries is. What's the height of your flowers in a tall black vase? Oh, Joan, I often think about that black vase that you bought. So I went to the charity shop in Tunbridge, which is just outside Tunbridge Wells, about a 40-minute drive from here. And I went with, well, how long ago was that? 5 years ago. And I found this beautiful vase, this high, black, conical, with a ribbing down the side. And it was reminiscent to me of a vase that, again, my mum and dad had. But that was white, but slightly bulbous. And when I got home and I peeled off the price, £2.49 I think I paid, it said Wedgwood on the bottom. So that vase was absolutely beautiful. And then when I was having one of my sales, that vase went across to Joan. Joan, I think it's just such a practical vase, isn't it? You cannot go wrong with that. If you want a rule, that your arrangements can be 1.5 times the height of your vase. I don't like a rule though, because I can't be going around my garden with a measuring tape to measure how long that bit of greenery is. And I would say do what suits you. Experience will tell you. The only thing I would say is perhaps not too short. So if you, for instance, that beautiful vase you've got, you could imagine a mass of daffodils or something. But the thing is, the daffodils are going to just be resting their heads on the top of the vase, and they're not going to be shown off quite so well. So you can go, I would say go any height, and in fact, go really, really tall. But the one thing that will govern how tall you go is the taller you go, the bigger you go, the wider you go, the more unstable everything becomes. And in floristry and flower arranging, we talk about balance. So we talk about actual balance. Is it going to topple over? And visual balance. Does it all look pleasing to the eye? So it's a combination of those two. But I wouldn't be sitting there measuring my vase and then measuring my greenery. I just think that it starts to distract from the joy that you're having about using a vase you love and doing your whole mindful stuff. Sometimes the rules can be stifle your creativity. And the thing to do is perhaps to cut long to start with, have a look and see what you think. And if you think actually it looks a little bit wrong, or I haven't actually got that much room on my mantelpiece to put this vase, well then you can take everything out and cut it off down at the bottom. So yes, trial and error. But yes, if you want a rule, it's 1.5 times the height. And of course you could come out sideways as well, but that is another issue. So what I've got here, do you remember the eucalyptus I showed you? So this eucalyptus is, I think it's now dried, and I don't like dried flowers, but look at this. These are going to be absolutely fabulous, tucked inside my lush, leathery, vibrant green laurel and the rustly texture of the bay. But it has managed to last. So I know exactly where I got this from. It's like all these old friends in my vase. So this was bought at the street market in town. Every Saturday in town, there's a flower stall. It was a mixed bouquet. Do you remember those ilex berries, the deciduous holly, where you don't have any leaves, it's just stick and then chunks of red berry, and it came with eucalyptus. Some of the eucalyptus went into my door wreath. I cut short sections and hot glued it in, and others I kept short. So do I want to keep these? Normally I don't like dried flowers, but I'm giving it the waggle test. I reckon, well, I think something might have fallen off then, that it's got a robustness about it. So I know that once it's in my vase, I'm not going to spend all week picking up leaves from the side. So if I gently lay those to the side, I've got a few of my catkins. Can you see this actually starting to come out now? So I've used the other stems. I've been plucking them out of the vase to put them into my containers where I've got my potted bulbs. Everything kind of gets recycled around. A bit more bay there. So what I'm doing off to my side here is I've got my twisted willow. That was from a Freddie's Flowers delivery. I'm sure I can get that in somewhere. I'm putting like with like, so I'm making this little conveyor belt. I'm brushing the bits of foliage off there. I would say with the pine, it's really, really sticky. Where the needles have come off, I don't know whether the camera can pick that up, but there's a sort of slight tackiness here. It is exactly like, I don't know whether you can see that, exactly like glue, like hot glue when you sort of mush it around. So I think probably I am ready to go, and I am getting rid of the ivy. I did look at picking some more, but the birds have been nibbling at it, and therefore it doesn't look quite as pristine as I would want it to be. So I thought, well, the berries are there for the birds, aren't they, as well as for me. So what I'm going to do here, I spotted a nice chunky bit of, I might stand up for this bit, nice chunky bit of greenery. So it's always easier to start off your bouquet when you've got something that's got a bit of substance to begin with, and then you start to add in your other materials. So this is quite actually heavy to hold, and you'll find that the more materials you add in, the heavier your little bunch will become. But this is a really good way of bringing a bit of the outdoors in, and giving yourself a nice green receptacle to add in, to enjoy as it is, but also, to be there, ready and waiting for your next bunch of flowers. And now I've lost, the eucalyptus, I was looking for it, and I tucked it out of the way because I didn't want to knock it. So it sort of starts to come out in a rounded shape, and I wouldn't be too bothered about wanting to get a perfect round, because life isn't perfect. These aren't wedding bouquets, and in fact the style now for a wedding bouquet is this more I've just picked it from the garden look. When I first trained as a florist 16, 17, 18 years ago, everybody wanted those bouquets where it was the roses and they were tightly massed together. So it's not about that, it's about having a much more natural look. And you're only restricted by what you can hold in your hand. So you can see the stem ends are splaying out there. And actually, where I've trimmed off the laurel and tuck it in, I don't think that is too big. It's just nestling down nicely there. So I am getting to the stage now where I'm sort of hefting the arrangement over. Didn't trim that one back, so trim off those leaves. Oh, manicure, stay on, please. I'm going to put my laurel there, but it's next to another bit of laurel. So I'm going to lift everything up, move it around, and then have it in like that. Yeah, loose and natural is the way to go, and it's very forgiving, a loose and natural bouquet, because you don't have to go for a pre-arranged shape. It's quite hard to do a compact rose bouquet because the roses aren't actually round, and you can never get a total circle. So let's imagine, I'm nearly done here because I'm running out of materials. So let's imagine that you've got your roses and you've got your flowers in the vase. So if I was going to do this as a bouquet, I'd tie it off now, but I'm not going to. I'm going to trim the ends and then I'll just drop it straight into a vase. But if you imagine this, my piece of eucalyptus is a rose. When you get your roses today, if you slightly loosen your grip on the flowers, loosen them and just relax your hand. Of course, if you relax your hand totally, everything's going to fall down. But if you just let it relax a little bit, and if you take your stem, you can slide it in, and then a bit of a corkscrew motion, it'll fit round all those stems. And there you can imagine my piece of eucalyptus was a rose. And so you would wiggle your red roses in. And that would be the way of having a green arrangement pending the arrival of your red roses. And, I'm going to put everything in. This little bit of twig can just come out to the side here. And then I have got my last two pieces of my little bit of willow. So I have used everything up. And then the only thing I need to think about is the size of the vase I'm going to use, because my stem ends are splayed out quite a lot. So I will have to get my secateurs out and give everything a good old chomp just to sort of restrain the ends. So I'm going to recut the stem ends because it's a good idea to do that so they can take up water. I'm just going to trim everything to a more manageable length. This really big chunky pine one there, it just makes it slightly narrower so it will fit more easily into my vase, and I can squish it down a little bit. But there, and I found one more here, so I can have that going out over there. And then just decide, has it got a back and a front? Quite like those bits there with the pine, so I might well put it into the vase like that. So it's the pine that you look at. So there we have an all foliage tied bouquet, and as Joan has just said, it's now all ready for your red roses. And doesn't it look brilliant? And of course, if I don't buy myself any red roses, I put it in the vase, I buy myself some tulips, And just imagine how beautiful the tulips would look. They grow and they move towards the light. So it would be a lovely sort of romantic arrangement there. So it doesn't always need to be red roses. So I think probably that's about all from me for now. I'm lifting up the vase. It's quite a good workout. I can feel my muscles working. Now, those of you who are following along with my Zoom flower classes, where I'm teaching you how to teach your own classes, if you've missed out on the first class, it's now been uploaded onto my website, so you can download that. It includes a PDF document, just written text document, which is loosely a transcript of the video. And it also includes 2 checklists that you can download and print out if you want to do that. And for those of you who join the class live, I will be sending that out to you in due course. Do you remember in the discussion chat we had at the weekend that you wanted a bit more help and guidance as to what I actually did? So I've put in a few extra words there, just giving my own lived experience to hopefully that will help you. And then this week I will be emailing you again just to confirm the sort of outline of the next 3 sessions. So the next teaching classes will be 3 sessions. Buy them as a package. It may well be that once you've done the first class that you might want the teaching, the sort of mechanics of how you teach classes. You may want to miss those and to sign up to the next set of classes. And those classes, again, as a suggestion for those of you who are having the chat, will be actually a DIY class. So I need to decide what arrangements I will be making, but I will make them not as if I am teaching you how to make the arrangement. I will be demonstrating and then kind of talking to you saying, I'm doing this because I need to get across this teaching point. And I think that's in response to what a couple of you said that you wanted me to do. So watch this space, really. So that's all from me for now. I hope you have a great Valentine's Day, and don't forget, the flower people, we all love each other. So even if you haven't got a special person in your heart, you are all special to me. So do come along and join my flower arranging community at Flower Start World over on Facebook, and there will be a link to that in the show notes under the video. And if you want me to leave details of those 4 Valentine's themed crafty arranging bits and pieces, let me know with a red heart and I will amend the description and get those added in for you as well. So yeah, spread the love, ladies and gentlemen, and why don't you show one of your friends or neighbours how they could make a flower arrangement and pass on those skills, and we'll light up the world one vase at a time. So that's all for me for now, and I'll catch up with you next week. So there's no live video on Facebook this week, but there will be my normal posted YouTube video on Monday as usual. Cheerio now.